Thank you so much. Merci, miigwech, huyanomik. I thank the elder for the wise words and opening that talked about listening, and that's why I'm here. And it's an honor to be here on the traditional Fort William First Nation territory, and the poignant welcome of Councillor Michelle Solomon. It began today in a good way for me. As you know, it's a exhilarating and daunting job that I've been given, and I think that Chief Day talked about being amongst teachers and about how much you like to talk, but I think it's just about you wanting to hand in your homework, in that you've been working on these issues for a very long time, and our job is to come and listen and to understand that you know what needs to be done. And certainly I think that that's certainly what I tried to express to the media who asked why I'm here. It is, I think, an amazing time. You've got such an amazing agenda for the next 3 days. I have to say, I wish I could just hang out with you for 3 days. It's what my team used to call my brain spa, when I used to be able to just come and learn and listen, and I hope we'll have many more opportunities. I was thrilled and inspired by your MCs with Tristan and Clyde, and thank you so much. And I wanted to begin by thanking the Centre for Indigenous Theatre for not only the Hokey Pokey, but I wanted to begin by just telling you that when I learned the Hokey Pokey, there was a last verse. So I'd like you to do that with me, and because it's sort of the way I hope you will see I want to do my work. Are you ready? Are you ready? Okay. You put your whole self in, you put your whole self out, you put your whole self in, and you shake it all about. You do the hokey pokey and you turn yourself around. That's what it's all about. So we we get the opportunity whenever I am asked to quote from former Prime Minister Paul Martin, who has said that in the modern era, education is the foundation for progress. And it's why he values all of you here, and it's why I couldn't agree more. But actually, what he's saying is that without a strong education system, nothing is sustainable. We don't carry anything forward unless we are learning from the past and teaching people the critical appraisal to be able to go forward in a good way. So as you know, as the former Minister of Hand Washing and now the Minister of Reconciliation, that you will know that I will never stop understanding the link between education and health, and how it is the social determinants of good housing and safe drinking water, access to employment, health care, and supportive communities, but child welfare, that all of these things come together as was discussed this morning. And so even though we were able to give each other the pulse this morning, I actually spent 20 years of my life taking the pulse of patients, and in taking the pulse of patients, I realized that I had been trained badly in the medical model, and it's only been recently in my understanding of the medicine wheel that we understand that we have to get away from this repair shop approach to health care. And so when I go and talk to people, I talk about that you can't use interchangeably the words health and health care, in that we want more health, we'd like to need less health care. If we just run this repair shop, we're not going to get there, and that it is the ways of Indigenous peoples and the medicine wheel that meant that we were to keep people well, not just patch them up when they get sick. It is about keeping people well mentally, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. And it is that understanding that actually starts also, not only does it start at home and with parenting, but it starts in schools, making sure that schools are safe places, free from bullying, able to build people's emotion and spirit up. And so that's how I see that the ultimate report card on what we're doing may be high school leaving numbers, but it will be health inequity as the ultimate report card of how, whether we're winning or losing. And as some people know that as ministers, you can see down there, that over the 2 years I was minister, that we developed this framework of my beloved Georgian Bay Pine Tree, where there were two feuding factions, the Jews health people. If these people, like all Canadians, would just stop drinking, exercise, eat nicely, and take care of them, stop smoking, that everything would be well. And then there were the social determinants of health people who said, is poverty stupid? And they didn't like each other very much. And so I thought that maybe I had to, one day on a boarding pass, drew a little tree, that what if the social determinants were the roots, and the choices people make, the modifiable risks, were in the tree trunk, and then the outcomes were in the healthy branches. I chose, after advice from the medical officers of health, not to have an apple tree whose leaves came off every fall. I was told to get a pine tree, and so we put the things that we don't want, like cancer, diabetes, on the west side. The west wind shapes the pine. We don't want those things, and the healthy things on the other side, like cardiovascular health and all of the mental health and all those things. But I think the reason I wanted you to see my tree today is it was Bill Mussel from the Native Mental Health Association who loved my tree, but said that it was missing its ground. You don't get it, Carolyn, your tree has no ground. And so you can barely see it there, but the ground there is someone's secure, sort of the secure personal and cultural identity. And that's what the former Prime Minister Martin said this morning, that your secure personal cultural identity can mean your self-esteem, your resilience, your sense of control over your life. That is imperative, because as we have all known, and yet you have all known, that kids who had problems, poverty, violence, the environment, poor housing, that with one teacher who believes in them, one role model, that they can start making healthy choices. And that's why I think that we will make this understanding of the need for language and culture as part of any education system, part of the way we want to do work together. And I know some people had noticed that language is not necessarily explicit in my mandate letter, but it is in the Minister of Heritage's. And so we will work together on that. But I wanted you to know that we get it, that language and culture is going to be hugely important to be the proud First Nations woman or a proud Métis young man, that this is the way that we will win in terms of the way we design and listen to you all on this. So, I have to disclose that I am the first in my family to go to university. My father had been a policeman and was able to do that after grade 12, and my mother was a florist who dropped out of school in grade 10 to run a branch for her mom, who was a florist. I got really sick in grade 9 and was in the Sick Children's Hospital for a month, and then I decided I wanted to be a doctor. And it is those stories that understand that my dad wasn't really sure I needed to go to university, I have to say, but it was because he was okay and hadn't gone. And I think that there is this intergenerational prejudice that sometimes happens, and that educators are the ones that can plant that seed of post-secondary and the kinds of things that people can do. So, I have to say that, as I already have, that my formal education was pretty great at the University of Toronto, but it has been over the past years that my education from my friends like Cynthia Wesley Eskimo that have changed my life. That this is my new friends that are First Nations, Inuit, Métis have changed my understanding of being a Canadian. And I think that what I keep saying coast to coast to coast is you shouldn't have to be an MP to have the experience that I have had. And that is, we will not get to nation, government to government until we're able to foster those interpersonal relationships that are built on trust and understanding and what it means, the strength of Indigenous teaching and knowledge and what was here first before the problems were created. So I'm pretty excited by my new word, how do you say it? Instead of pedagogy, indigogy. Is that right? Indigogy. But when I was out speaking to indigogy. But how about I misheard Chief Wesley, and I thought he'd said indigication. So I thought maybe that's my next favorite word, indigication. It's sometimes good when you don't hear properly. You can make up neologisms that are sometimes not a good sign. But it is, and I think it was Suzanne Stewart at OISE who first talked to me about Indigenous pedagogy, which is now indigigogy, that understood that this was learning by doing. I used to say that everything I needed to know I learned at summer camp, and I think that's still pretty well true. But I'm reminded amongst all of you that there weren't any blackboards there. When we learned about responsibility and friendship and leadership, that's what we did. But we also learned a fair bit about physics when we couldn't actually get our canoe out in a wind. We learned a lot of things that Mother Nature was an excellent teacher. And I think I've been struck by, even when we were doing the public health goals for Canada, to have Margot Greenwood help us with the language that meant people knew that we felt that there was lots of learning from the land. And I guess I'm struck by how that sentiment is so central to First Nations learning. Some of the wording on the Aboriginal Education Resource Centre website struck me, and it says that the distinctive features of Indigenous knowledge and pedagogy are learning by observation and doing, through authentic experiences and individualized instruction, and learning through enjoyment. And some of the best teachers I knew understood that you educate lightly and entertain greatly was what my friend Joss Palm at Glen Bernard Camp used to teach us when I was up there as the doctor. So in this learning by doing piece, I'm always struck when I see the slide that Justice Sinclair uses of kids in tidy little rows sitting looking at a blackboard, and think, like, who decided that was a good idea, putting kids in tidy little rows staring at a blackboard? And I always think that, that the idea that you would teach physics there by drawing an arrow on the blackboard and explaining where the wind's coming from or where the force is coming from, instead of standing in a stream and having the force feel between your ankles as to where it's coming and what that actually means. And so I guess I think that it is going to be important that in everything you do, that you understand that we want you to do it your way, that this is not necessary to replicate, as we used to say in the IT world, that just, sort of putting online things that were bad doesn't make it digital. We should be using the digital world to make things better than they are, not just replicate what's not working in person. And so I hope that you will understand that as you develop curricula and develop on the land units and the kinds of things that work for your people, that you will know that you have an ally in us, that it doesn't have to look like downtown Toronto in order for you to be able to persuade our government that this is a worthwhile way of going ahead. We think that from Akwesasne to Wiki, the boards of education are exciting. I think you heard me say many times that the reason why the Education Act didn't work was because it didn't seem to understand at all what was already there, what all the neat things that were happening across the country, as though it was some big blank slate that the government of Canada was going to write on. This is not okay, and I think that in the places that we know are successful, it's because language and culture is working, and that people understand that everyone learns differently. The expression of intellect and emotions and spirit through art, music, culture, and sports should not be afterthoughts. We know what happened in downtown Toronto when the Mike Harris government cut those programs, and we ended up very quickly at Jane and Finch to Guns and Gangs. That because kids had other talents that were in music and sport and art that weren't realized, that those kids who had maybe a learning disability or were struggling ended up finding that they didn't belong, and ended up finding other ways of getting attention. So it is only then that people are able to be successful. And I guess the piece that Cynthia's taught me so much, and that we can't deny when you look at the calls to action of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, is putting children first. Means that I every day think of that 10-month-old on the bed in Attawapiskat when Bob Ray and I went to visit. That child deserves an opportunity. And it isn't about people criticizing people around that child. It is about that child. And it is, as Cynthia's taught me, was always the chief's job to make sure that no child went hungry. It is about making sure that we can do this together, and it does. And in the Truth and Reconciliation Commission calls to action, those ones about children were purposely put at the front of the report. It's where we have to start. And so it is about, if you put children first, if you think 7 generations out even about the children, then that is what helps shape public policy. If you put children first and vulnerable children firstest, you can actually be able to move forward and actually get it right. What about the children? Should be the question that we ask in our ministry every day, and I hope to be able to incent that sentiment. Because the Indigenous youth are the youngest, fastest growing segment of the population. They need to have the best possible opportunities to succeed, and their families, their communities, and our country will all benefit as a result. And certainly I think you've seen that in the mandate letters and in the commitment of the Prime Minister on this task. So it is what the Prime Minister, by taking the youth portfolio himself, but also by putting the relationship with Indigenous people in Canada, the mandate letter of every minister, that we hope that this is clear as to how we need to go forward, lifting everybody and all Canadians into this joint project of reconciliation. So we believe that education is central to reconciliation. As Justice Sinclair says many times, it's education, or what passed for it, was what got us into this situation, and it's only education that's going to lead us out of it. And so I think that becomes the keys to open doors and opportunity and success, but it also is the key on the non-Indigenous side to eliminating stereotypes and eliminating this misunderstanding that is holding us back as a country. So providing more Indigenous content in that education can help begin to reverse the wrongs of the past. Our government strongly believes that Indigenous communities must be able to promote, preserve, and enhance their languages and culture. But on the other side of that, as some of you know, I believe all Canadians need to be better educated about First Peoples. Around the world, Canadians can learn from other countries that have done it successfully. And I think that all of us hold up New Zealand as maybe 30 years ahead of us, that have Maori culture integral part of K-8 education, not as social studies, but integral into all the subjects. And it means that I understand that no New Zealand child would sit on a desk or a table because it's against Maori culture. I think that there is this Maori history and culture that's part of the identity of all New Zealanders. And so the haka that starts the football games, but also is used in the armed forces there, is part of this understanding of one another and what makes that country strong. So they found a way forward in the reconciliation to repair the essential relationship between the First Peoples there and their settlers. And it is, I think, the need for Canada to do the same. I think that lots will tell us that because there's only one language and it's almost 20% of the population, they had an easier go. I don't think that means we shouldn't start. We actually need to start because we're frankly way behind, and we will have 60-some languages to deal with. We will have this smaller percentage of the population, but maybe not for long. But I also have this idea that this has to take place in the urban schools too, because when First Nations, Inuit, Métis children are sitting alongside of their non-Indigenous students, they need to be learning the same thing, which is an authentic history of our country, including the dark chapters that we share, and that we actually need people going forward together. So I do think that we are at a critical juncture, as we've heard this morning, in the relationship between Canada and Indigenous people. I think that we need to move forward in a good way based on recognition, rights, respect, cooperation, and partnership. And I hope I'll never get tired of saying those 3 R's: recognition, rights, respect, and cooperation and partnership, that is what will be underlying our work together. It means that the Government of Canada and all Canadians need to listen to First Nations, Inuit, and Métis communities. It is Indigenous leadership of asking, not telling. That's the way I see my work. It is about that Father knows best, and as Nellie Cornway said in 1975, paternalism has been a total disaster. And so we actually have to listen to the communities, but we also need to make sure that the voices of the children and the youth, as we learned here in Thunder Bay with listening to those children at the Feathers of Hope conference, it's changed the understanding of all of us who were invited to come and listen to them. It is their lived experience that must shape our policies and our way forward. It is through listening to the children that we will get this right. So we need to make sure that both sets of voices are heard. the educators and the people like you that have been working in this area for a very long time. We need your voices. We need, as Prime Minister Martin said, we need your plan as to how that can work. But we need to make sure that the children are the central and that they are our reference group. They will know what's working and not working. And we need to make sure that in what we design, that the children are heard as we go forward together. So it is energizing as always for me to be with you and to see really the passion with which you undertake your jobs. And I must say that we know that it's not been easy, but we are heartened to hear from Grand Chief Peters and the regional chief that the hope that's coming for also your dealings with the provincial government is very, very exciting, because we will need both sides of this. And I just can't thank you for including me in this. I see my job also as creating allies for you, coast to coast to coast, till we have all Canadians on side. So merci, miigwech, kuyanamik.
I just want to say on behalf of Chiefs of Ontario, thank you to the Honourable Carolyn Bennett of Indigenous Affairs and I probably said that wrong, Minister of Indigenous and Northern Affairs Canada. So right now we're cutting into our lunch. We're 15 minutes into it. So lunch is over there in the back. I hear a few growling stomachs there. So we'll resume at 1 o'clock with our first discussion panel. And don't forget to visit the booths. Thank you.